Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 22, Probable Origin of Serapis, Part 2, The Worship of Mithras and Serapis from the Gnostics and Their Remains, Ancient and Medieval by C.W. King. 2. The Probable Origin of Serapis. The ancient speculations cited in the preceding chapter are all baseless theories due to the ingenious refinements of the Alexandrian literati and springing out of the system of allegorical interpretation in which the new Platonists so much delighted. It is evident that upon his first introduction into Egypt, Serapis was regarded by the Alexandrians as identical with Aïdoneus, or Dis, the lord of the lower world. Now all his attributes suggest him to have been of Indian origin, and no other than Yama, lord of hell, attended by his dog Kabra, the spotted who has the epithet Trisera, three-headed, and by his serpent Sesha, called regent of Hades. In fact, some have discovered in the name Serapis, but the Grecian form of Yama's epithet, Sradadeva, lord of the obsequies, that is, of the funeral sacrifices offered to the Pitris or Manes. It is not improbable that the name under which the god was worshipped at Sinope had something of this sound, and which suggested to Manetho the idea of identifying him with his own Osa Api. Yama also is styled Lord of Souls and Judge of the Dead. Another office assimilating him to Serapis in the character under which the latter came to be specially regarded, a point moreover which at a later date afforded stronger reasons for identifying him with Christ. A plausible etymology of the name Serapis may be found in another of Yama's epithets, Asrikpa, the blood drinker. This explanation is confirmed to some extent by the ancient tradition of which Homer makes such fine use when he describes Ulysses's mode of evoking the ghosts and their eagerness to lap up the lifeblood of the victim. Seizing the victim's sheep, I pierced their throats, flowed the black blood and filled the hollow trench. Then from the abyss, eager their thirst to slake, came swarming up the spirits of the dead. And connected with the same notion was the practice of strewing roses over the graves of departed friends. Purpureos spargam flores et fungar inani munere. For, as Servius explains it, the red color of the flower represented blood, and thereby served as a substitute for the living victim. One of the most frequented places of pilgrimage at Benares is the Gyan Bapi, well of knowledge, in the depths whereof Siva himself resides. It was dug by the genius Rishi with that god's own trident to relieve the world after a 12 years drought. The pilgrims throw into it offerings of all kinds, flowers included. Another well in the same city of supreme efficacy for the washing away of all sin is the Manikarnika, so called from the earring of Mahadeva, which fell into it. Vishnu had dug this well with his Changra, quoit, and filled it with the luminous sweat of his body. This analogy between Yama and Serapis may be further extended by the consideration of certain other points connected with the office of the former deity. For example, unto the souls of the righteous he appears as Dharma Raja and has a servant, Karma La, the Hermes Psychopompus of the Greeks, who brings them into his presence upon a self-moving car. But unto the wicked he is Yama, and has for them another minister, Kashmala, who drags them before him with halters round their necks over rough and stony places. Other titles of Yama are Kritanta and Marityu. The connection of the latter with Moors is evident enough, making it a fitting appellation for Dis Ditis, in which again unmistakably lies the root of our name, death, applied to the same principle of destruction. Yama as Srada Deva, monarch of Patala, the infernal regions, has for consort Bhavani, who hence takes the title of Patala Devi, as upon earth she is Bhudevi, in heaven Swadevi. Her lord owns, besides Kabra, another dog named Kiyama, the black one. Now we see wherefore the medieval familiar spirits like Cornelius Agrippa's black spaniel and Faustus's poodle chose that particular figure, whom he employs as the minister of his vengeance. As judge of souls, he displays two faces, the one benign, the other terrific. Another of his titles is Kalantika, time as the destroyer. It can hardly be a mere accidental coincidence that such was the exact name given to the headdress worn by the Egyptian priests when officiating, in later times a purple cloth covering the head and falling down upon the neck, surmounted by two plumes. Kali Bhavani, the destructive female principle, is represented in this character with a visage exactly identical with the most ancient type of the Grecian Gorgon, such as we still behold it guarding the Etruscan sepulchres and lowering horrifically upon the sacrilegious intruder, as in that notable example in the tomb of the Volumni at Perugia, where it forms the centerpiece of the ceiling of the Grand Hall, formed of a tiger's head in its first conception by the excited fancy of Hindu superstition. The Etruscan demon still exhibits the same protruded tongue, huge tusks, glaring eyes, wings in the hair, and serpents twining about the throat. Of such aspect was doubtless that Gorgon's head, the work of the Cyclops, which was shown to Pausanias as the most notable object in the Argive Acropolis, a proof that the earliest essays of Pelasgic art had been made in realizing this idea. Again, in that most ancient monument of Grecian art, the coffer of Cypselus, made before BC 600, the same traveller states, 519, behind Polynices stands a female figure having tusks as savage as those of a wild beast, and the nails of her fingers like unto talons. The inscription above her, they tell you, means fate. This name, therefore, must have been a foreign word, translated to Pausanias by the custodian of the temple. Plutarch, Life of Aratus, supplies another singular illustration of the worship of these terrific idols of the olden time in the most polished ages of Greece. The Artemis of Pellene was of so dreadful an aspect that none dared to look upon her, and when carried in procession, her sight blasted the very tree and crops as she passed. When the Aetolians were actually in possession of and plundering the town, her priestess, by bringing this image out from the shrine, struck them with such terror that they made a precipitate retreat. This Artemis consequently must have been a veritable Hecate, a true queen of hell, an idol moreover of wood, like her of Ephesus. Otherwise the priestess had not been able to wield it so effectually to scare away the marauders. Again, the recorded dream of Simon, which presaged his death, was that a ship bayed at him in a half-human voice, "Come to me, I and my whelps will receive thee gladly." The Hellenic gods now and then show themselves under an aspect strangely at variance with their usual benevolent and jovial character. A true Siva was that Dionysos Omestes, the cannibal, unto whom Themistocles, forced by the diviners, sacrificed the 3 sons of Sandouch, own sister to Xerxes, when taken prisoners on the eve of the Battle of Salamis. It must be remembered that tradition made Perseus bring back the Gorgon's head, trophy of his success, from Ethiopia, a synonym at first for the remotest East, it being only in Roman times that Ethiopia was restricted to a single province of Africa. The harpe, too, the weapon lent to the hero by Hermes, is from its form no other than the ankusa, elephant hook, which is carried for attribute by so many of the Hindu deities. The Gorgon of the gems and of the coin of Neapolis is regularly to be seen to this day, sculptured in relief upon the pillar set up on each side of the gates of Hindu temples, as I am informed by our great Oriental archaeologist, Colonel Pierce. She goes by the name of Keeper of the Gate. Now we see why her head decorated the pediments of temples in Greece and Rome and formed the keystone of triumphal arches even in the time of Constantine, as the lately discovered entrance to his Forum of Taurus convincingly attests. Sufficient explanation this why Persephone, destroying Slayer, was assigned by the earliest Greeks as consort to Aïdoneus, and also why Ulysses, on his visit to her realms, should have been alarmed, lest from deep hell Persephone the dread should send the terror of the Gorgon's head. From the influence of this terror upon the otherwise undaunted wanderer, these same 2 lines came to be considered as endued with a wonderfully strong repellent power, for Marcellus Empiricus prescribes them to be whispered into the ear of anyone choking from a bone or other matter sticking in his throat, or else to write them out on a paper to be tied around his throat, which will be equally effectual. Lucian remarks, Philopatris Gusha, that the reason why the ancient warriors bore the Gorgon's head upon their shields was because it served for an amulet against dangers of every sort. On the same account, in all likelihood, was it put for device on many archaic coinages, Populonia, Paros, etc. For what could be more effective for the purpose of scaring away all evil spirits than the visible countenance of the Queen of Hell? Timomachus the painter, contemporary with the first Caesar, made his reputation by such a subject, Praecipue tamen asai favisse in Gorgonevisa est, are the words of Pliny, which masterpiece is supposed the original of the horrific fresco discovered at Pompeii, the finest example of the art that has reached our times. Many centuries after the fall of paganism did this image retain its power. Munter figures, sin builder de Christen, a Gorgon's head surrounded by the phonetic legend, blackened one, as a serpent thou coilest thyself quietly, thou shalt roar like a lion, thou shalt go to sleep like a lamb. The same inscription, but so barbarously spelt as to be unintelligible, probably forms the legend upon the famous seal of Saint Servatius, preserved in Maastricht Cathedral. The seal is a large disc of green jasper engraved on both sides and is attached to a small slab of porphyry, traditionally passing for the saint's portable altar. Servatius died AD 389, but the workmanship of his seal betokens the 10th or 11th century for its origin, an important evidence of the veneration of the Christian Byzantines for their guardian demon is afforded by the exhumation, spring of 1869, in the Armadan, Constantinople, of the colossal Gorgonian, 6 feet high from chin to brow, carved in almost full relief on each side of an immense marble block, which once formed the keystone of the gateway to the Forum of Constantine. Though the execution betrays the paralysis of the decline, yet the general effect still remains grandiose and awe-inspiring. Having thus traced Pavani in her progress from archaic Greek to Byzantine times, let us observe the part she plays in the superstitions of imperial Rome. The idea, full of novel horrors, was gladly seized by the extravagant genius of Lucan to animate the exorcisms of his Thessalian sorceress Erichtho, Pharsalia 4, 695, who had in all probability learnt them at some of the mysteries, all of Asiatic origin, so popular in his times with all persons making pretensions to the title of philosophers. And chaos ever seeking to enfold unnumbered worlds in thy confusion old, and earth's dull god, who pining still beneath life's lingering burthen, pinest for tardy death, Tisiphone, and thou her sister fell, Megaera, thus regardless of my spell, why haste ye not with sounding scourge to chase the soul accursed through hell's void, formless space? Say, must I call you by the names, your right, and drag the hell-hounds forth to the upper light? Midst death I'll dog your steps at every turn, chase from each tomb and drive from every urn, and thou still wont with visage not thine own to join the gods round the celestial throne, though yet thy pallor doth the truth betray and hint the horrors of thy gloomy thee, Hecate, in thy true form I'll show, nor let thee change the face thou wearest below. I'll tell what feasts thy lingering steps detain in earth's deep centre, and thy will enchain. Tell what the pleasures that thee so delight, and what tie binds thee to the king of night. And by what union wert thou so defiled, thy very mother would not claim her child. I'll burst thy caves, the world's most evil lord, and pour the sun upon thy realms abhorred, striking thee lifeless by the sudden day, if still reluctant my behests to obey. Or must I call him at whose whispered name earth trembles awestruck through her inmost frame, who views the Gorgon's face without a veil, and with her own scourge makes Erinnys quail, to whom the abyss, unseen by you, is given, to which your regions are the upper heaven, who dares the oath that binds all gods to break, and marks the sanction of the Stygian lake. All these personifications are in a spirit quite foreign to that of Grecian mythology, but thoroughly imbued with that of India. Lucan's chaos is the Hindu destroyer, the giant, Mahapralaya, swallowing up the gods themselves in his wide gaping jaws. His recta terrae, pining for the promised annihilation that is so long in coming, finds no parallel in classical religions, and his character remains to me utterly inexplicable, unless perhaps obscurely shadowed forth by Hesiod, from whom Milton drew his grand picture of chaos, on whom wait Orcus and Hades, and the dreaded name of Demogorgon. His furies, hunting souls to make them fly, instead of being like the old awful Eumenides, the impartial avengers of guilt, are mere demons or churchyard ghouls. But his Hecate is manifestly Bhavani herself, her facies Erebee being the Gorgonian aspect which the latter was when reigning in Yamaputri, but which she puts off when presiding on earth or in heaven, whilst the infernal banquets that so enchant her are the human sacrifices regularly offered up by Bhavani's special votaries, the thugs. In the first or infernal aspect, a true fasces Erebi, she's depicted wearing a necklace of human skulls and grasping in each hand a naked victim ready to be devoured. She probably still shows us in what shape the Artemis of Pelen appeared to scare away the Aetolian plunderers. The title of her lord, Pessimus Mundi Arbiter, is far more applicable to the destroyer Siva than to the inoffensive Pluto of the Greeks. Unless indeed the Neronian poet may have heard something of the demiurgus Ildebarth, son of darkness, or Erebus, existing under a different name in some ancient theogony. The Gnostics did not invent, they merely borrowed and applied. Bhavani, in her character of Kali, is sculptured as a terminal figure, the exact counterpart in outline of the Ephesian Diana. Even the stags, those remarkable adjuncts to the shoulders of the latter, are seen in a similar position springing from Kali's hands. The multiplied breasts of the Ephesian statue were also given to the Alexandrian Isis, who is allowed by Creusa and the rest to be the Hindu goddess in her character of Parvati. Now this remark applies only to her statue in the Serapeum, not to those belonging to the ancient Pharaonic religion, and Macrobius's expressions show that her real character there was as much a matter of dispute as that of her companion, Serapis. Again, Diana as Hecate or Proserpine belongs to the infernal world over which she rules with the same authority as Bhavani over Yamaputri. The Ephesian image made of cypress wood had fallen down from heaven, which only means had come from some very remote and unknown source. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.